Welcome. Hey, welcome to the shop, eh? Gotta get in the mood, you know? AJ, I am heat treating this spear today. It is fully forged. I don't intend to do anything else on video with that, but I am heat treating it in the background. Today, we are going to forge one of my, well, I have a lot of favorite forging projects, but today we're going to forge some knives with a tail, well, a lanyard tail. Excuse me. And kind of a patch knife, really. Pretty nifty little project. Trying to get a little better view for you guys this time so you can see what I'm actually doing. A little better, hopefully. Beautiful Friday afternoon. How is everyone doing? How is everyone today? How's the week been? The week went by too fast. So much to do, so little time. That is the story of my life. But we got some more knives put up today, or not today, this week, and a bunch more in the works. I'll show some of those to you guys. Yeah, I get to hang out here and do a little forging. It's always a good way to end the week. Steve, how's it going? Cold up there in the mountains. Okay, I gotta put on the old, every single time I have to do this, YouTube doesn't show all the comments. They show the top comments. I don't even know what that means. Mini Maker, is that a Swiss flag? OG Frenchie, how's it going? We're gonna forge some groovy little knives today. That's what we're gonna do. Have some fun, hang out a little bit. I got a comment on the last live stream from somebody who watched it after the fact, and they said there was too much talking. I don't think that's the general consensus, but I'm curious to know what the faithful have to say about that. More talking, less talking. I like to explain what I'm doing usually. Danish, okay. AJ, lately, I've been turning out about 10 a week, 8 to 10 a week, kind of. That's where it's been, and I'm trying to keep that going. And most of those have been stock removal lately, because I've got repeated models that I'm cranking out, and trying to keep things in stock. And then I will do batches of forged knives as well. We're going to do a small batch of forged knives today. That's the idea. So I've got some 52-100 high carbon steel here. And let me know how the audio is. Good to hear. Real quick, yeah. GJG. Yeah, let me show you those. This is a new model. I sold one this week. It was a one-off, and that's this new model is what I was actually working on this week. Because the way it works is I'll finish the batch from last week. But you know, I'm building new knives, so I actually have 2 more batches in different stages. In this batch, these are ready for handles, and they got some oil and dust on them, so they need wiped off. But so this batch is going to get handles put on first thing next week, and then I've got another batch that's going to get finished ground. And anyway, just kind of progressively go through that. This week, I finished up a kind of mixed batch, which you may have seen on one of the shorts, and they're all up on the website now. But this is the new model. This is the Deep Creek EDC, and I really like it. It is a sweet little knife, and I am going to be putting some sheep horn on them. Not all of them. Some will be ironwood, some will be probably some micarta, but I will be putting some sheep horn on some of these as well. And that's the latest one. There you have it. So those will be coming out next week. Those will be ready to go next week. And then probably the following week, assuming everything goes to plan, we have, give you guys a sneak peek here, another brand new model. And this is heat treated. It needs finished ground. This is where this batch is at. This is the Classic. This is also a very sweet little knife, little drop point skinner, and I'm really excited about these as well. So those are probably 2 weeks out. So, yeah, keeping things rolling forward. I debated today whether to work on these curly tail knives. I don't know what to call them. They've got a tail that creates like a loop. It's pretty cool. You may have seen it before. I debated whether to do that or to work on some tooling for axe type projects, because I need to essentially build some I need to build a couple different drifts. I need to build a drift for essentially a double bit small axe, although that is only going to be one of the purposes for it, and I can't really talk about that right now. That's something groovy that's in the works. It will be revealed when the time is right. And then I also need to build, or I think I have a drift I can use. I need to modify a drift for a single bit axe that is going to be a Sawyer's axe. And that's something with like a 26-inch handle on it and a decent weight to it for pounding wedges and different type of stuff that you need when you're cutting trees down and working in the woods. So that's a couple things that I need to that I'm working on here. But today we are going to build some of these knives. Kind of a patch knife. Planning to put some multi-pin handles on them. Kind of like the somewhat recent patch knife or Mountain Man knife batch that I did. Like the 6 or 8 pins in the handles. Pretty neat look. These will be similar. First thing I'm going to do is draw down a point here. This is another way to achieve a point. You guys can't hardly see what's going on. Sorry about that. Let me readjust things here. This is another way to achieve a point. Oh, come on, I can't get that loosened up. I'm just going to have to tip the camera. Sorry for all the camera shaking everywhere. There you go. Now you can actually see what's happening. Last week we did a angle cut and then forged the tip around this way. This week, in this case, we're taking the stock and forging down both sides and making a point. That is something you have to be careful that you don't end up with the fish lips. AJ, yeah, those knives are going to have full, it's skeletonized. The tang is skeletonized. That's for weight reduction and balance on the knife. It's going to have handle skills on it, like ironwood or whatever the handle material is going to be. So, you won't see that, but it's all about balance of the knife and stuff. So let's forge this down. This stock is really, really thick because what this is 3/4 inch round bar that I forged down in the press. And so it's plenty thick. It's like, 9/32, whatever. It's thick. 3/8 of an inch, close to 3/8 inch thick. So you have to forge it down quite a bit. Which, depending on what you're making, that can be really helpful to have that ability to do that. GJG, the forge that I'm currently using at this moment, is a 2-burner Majestic brand knife maker's forge with modified installation, meaning I've added my own version of insulation in it, i.e. soft fire brick, closed off the end, enhanced the insulation, which makes it run hotter if you want it to. Very nice. All right, so we've got this forged out. It's still plenty thick. I'm gonna cut this off right about here, and then we'll start forging the handle and forging the blade and make everything come out to where it's supposed to be. And even though I should have a real hot cut, because it's not like I don't do this pretty often, you know, that really should be a project that I forge in the near future. But in the meantime, I'll find my chisel here. That works. I do not know. I still have to use this thing. That's not really a chisel. Oh boy. It's terrible. That is no bueno. Well, I've got to get that heated up, and then we can hot cut it. Even though I don't have an actual hot cut, I use a chisel. But I seem to have misplaced it. Oh, there it is. Not cutting all the way through because I don't want to. I think I should have given myself a little more material there, actually, to be honest. But instead of cutting all the way through on that, cut most of the way through and then just bend it, break it off. You don't want to mar up the surface of the anvil too bad, or at all, actually. I think you guys can see the anvil and the power hammer pretty well now. Oh gee, we're doing like a curly tail patch knife. Got the little lanyard loop kind of a deal. Probably gonna be similar, just all one-off knives, you know. Alright, so I've got this. I'm going to start forging myself a tail on here. Ooh, I got a bit of a cold shut in there. See that, guys? I don't know if you can see it. To be honest, I'm not even sure how that happened. Where are y'all at? Where's this out here? See that? Cold shut right there. That's no good. I have to grind that off. We're gonna grind this off and start over. That will not be good. Okay, I got it ground off. I don't think I need to grind that whole tail off. But what's that? Probably sloppy hammer application, things like that. Samdol, I mean, wouldn't be a bad thing if it was weekly. I guess what it comes down to is like, assuming I get my chores done, so to speak, like keeping things moving along in the shop, which I feel like I've been able to do the last couple of weeks, and coming out here and kind of enjoying some interaction and forges and stuff. Yeah, I'd like to, and nothing, just no pressure, like just having fun. The problem with like YouTube oftentimes is like you're always trying to figure out how to make a video that gets views or whatever, and if you're not worried about how many views it's going to get, you're just, hey, this is what I'm forging, come hang out. It's a lot easier just to chill out, have fun. Okay, I'm preparing to cut the second knife billet off of the material, and this time I'm going to give myself a little more material on there. Try to make a longer tail on this here. It's going to be kind of a tiny knife. I've got another little cold shut I got to take care of. Oops, went too far. I went too far. Y'all see what's going on here? I'm using the corner of the anvil, corner of my hammer, and we're forging out a wee bit of a tail. I'm gonna leave that right there for the moment and use it as a handle to forge out the rest of this. Grab our second piece here. Give ourselves a bit more material for this tail this time. That forged up here. Shoulders on this anvil are pretty rounded, but that's okay. Still works. That's why I kind of have to come back here a little bit, because it's a little better corner. Up in here towards the horn, it's a very large radius. All right. Okay, so you can see what we got here. Got a nice shape here, tail. What I need to do now is forge in the finger. It's not a choil. What do you call it? I don't know where the finger goes, and the ricasso starts. But I'm gonna set that aside shortly or momentarily, and forge this tail out some more on this one. Okay, so this is an example of where the forge is heated up, and I could go turn it down and stuff, but it's too hot to leave stuff sitting in there while you're working on the other piece. So I'm just going to set this to the side, and we're going to put this in here. If you can, and you're rotating multiple 2 or more items through the forge, and you can become more efficient that way, that's great. But if stuff's getting overheated and staying in the forge too long, then it's not helpful. It's not really helping you produce a good product. So, okay. So to forge in this finger choil thingamajiggy, you know what I need is I need a half-inch round bar, and I have one, I think, somewhere. I thought I had one. I typically use a, here we go. I typically use a 3/4 round bar on medium to larger knives, but I think this is a better size to start a choil with on this knife because it's a bit smaller. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that, but just setting this in here like so, using it as an open die, and forging that down in there. And this is going to be the handle. This is our blade. Pretty slick. So we're going to flip it around again. Put the tail in the forge. Tail end back in the forge. If you have any questions, throw them out. I can see them all right here. Hey Eric, how's it going? Yeah, I feel like it makes it a little more watchable, especially as a video on the channel, post it up. All right, so we're gonna forge this material kind of back towards the tail because we've got, obviously the handle is much too short right now, so we need to be able to move some of that material back and kind of create a curve to the handle for the fingers to fit in. So that's what we're doing here. And as you can see, we still have plenty of material. It's still quite thick. So this handle is not going to be a little short handle. It's going to be plenty long. And the next thing I'm going to do is thin that out on the power hammer, which is going to give us quite a bit of length, but you can see where this is starting to go. Yeah, I set in my deposit for Texas Blade Show, March 2026, coming up. So back at that next year. Mike, how's it going? I always wait until like I have always waited until I've only been to like 2 shows, but I always wait till sort of the last several months to put in my deposit, and it actually goes up when you do that. So maybe I'll actually put my deposit in right away next year and save about $125. I don't know, I've had mixed feelings about the shows, but you know, the Texas show is so close, relatively speaking. It almost doesn't make sense not to go if I'm going to go to any show. By Texas standards, it's kind of in my backyard. It's only 6 hours away, 5.5. So I figured, you know, might as well. Got to show up to something more than once. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. Starting to take shape very nicely. This tail's gonna, you know, make a loop in the end here, but we're still working down the thickness of the tang. And we're gonna refine the shape of the handle a little bit. Some of that could be cleaned up after the fact, but everything that's gonna stay forged obviously has to be complete out of the forging process, and that includes everything from here back, which you'll see as we go along. But so far I'm pretty happy with the way it's turning out. Crosses and bottle openers, that's cool. Yeah, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, if you're not, the Rivers Experience. Eric over there, he does a lot of forging streams. You should check him out if you haven't already. He also takes the time to explain what he's doing and makes it very educational for people. So especially if you're new to forging or intermediate or whatever, you can check his channel out. And he does live streams frequently. I am digging how this is coming out. This is, you know, I had this in my brain. You know, it's always nice when you have something on your mind and you want to build it and it comes out pretty closely to what you're trying to make. It's always nice. It doesn't always happen that way. I'm gonna, where'd my half-inch rod go? There it is. I was gonna deepen that choil a little bit, and I set my half-inch rod over there. Not very handy. You stand around for 5 or 10 seconds and you lose some heat, so it don't work. Okay, just a couple taps, nothing crazy. That's one spot that's not necessary to have completely forged out. So obviously you can clean that up on the grinder, and I will, you know. But you'll find that if you forged your finger choil in and then start forging everything else out, it'll really wash it out and you lose a lot of it. That definition at that spot on the blade. Okay, so we're really gonna get a little more aggressive and thin down this tang. So I've got to work on this tail. It looks kind of crazy right now, but the tang is a lot closer to what I want it to be. It's tapered, and it's about 1/8 of an inch thick back here. So I'm actually gonna flip this around and forge the thickness down on the blade, because as you can see, we still have quite a bit of thickness there, and that's gonna help me define the length of my blade. And then we can start really dialing in the final profile and everything like that. Austin, what is up, my friend? Doing all right. Just busy working and paying the bills and whatever else it is that you do when you're raising a family and everything. Okay, here we go. My bottom die is coming loose again. It's just happens every certain amount of time. Can't get my Allen wrench in there. There's too much junk in there. Fiddle with that. This is going to get too much heat. Okay, it's coming along quite nicely. I want to refine that blade shape a little bit. I don't want to leave it out of the forging like that. Austin, I haven't hunted since we've been down here, unfortunately. Everything down here is private land. So you have to find some place to pay for a lease, hunting lease, which is what everybody does. And I haven't done that. The next closest thing would be to hop over into New Mexico. You can apply to draw a tag. And I actually hear that out-of-state people have a better chance of drawing like an elk tag or something than residents do. Maybe because they put preference on the out-of-state tags, which costs more. And a lot of people from Texas do that as well. And there is I guess there's some good elk hunting and stuff in New Mexico. And that's about 3 hours away from where we're at. And I actually do kind of have thought about doing that next year, and I may do that, try to do that. But in general, no, sadly. I really miss being able to just go out and find a decent whitetail and put it in the freezer. You know, that was pretty doable. Northern half of Idaho, not really a problem. Not as many deer in the southern half. You know, got your mule deer and they're a lot more spread out, but and of course elk hunting, you can do that in multiple different places, but I am pretty happy with this. I'm gonna curve the handle a little bit more, but overall that's coming together quite nicely. Yes, quite nicely indeed. Okay. I cannot believe what just happened. The knob on the end of my tongs just fell off. I thought these were a solid piece, but clearly that's not the case. That is interesting. Look at that. Okay, well, learn something new every day, right? Yep. All right. I mean, that's a little disappointing. You would think these are all forged from a solid piece. And I don't understand. It doesn't make sense that you've got so much stock up here, but obviously it's quicker and cheaper to do it that way, to add a little knob on the end. But you would think that these tong pieces came from plenty thick stock, since the jaws require some pretty sizable material. But what do I know? All right, this is looking sweet. So I'm going to forge this tail down some more and make it more proportional. It got really wide when we were flattening it out. So I'm going to forge it down narrower. Well, I'll have plenty of material for this tail. I think that's a fact. Got grease all over the reins on these Togs now. Messing with that, tightening up that bottom die on the power hammer here. All right, I need to taper this down, and you'll see why that's important here. Round the corners a little bit. Don't want it to be too sharp. The corner on that. Then we get my little hammer. Alright, so what we're going to do first is curl it backwards and do a full curly Q kind of a thing. Get a little more heat back in that. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Curling that back around there. And then we're going to curl it the opposite way. And yes, this one turned out plenty big. Let's just put it that way. I didn't really need as much material as I thought I needed, I guess. Okay, pretty sweet. Okay. Yeah, come here, buddy. All right, just a minute. Just a minute. Okay, so this one is done. Just a little bit of straightening here. Trying to pick it up without grabbing it to show you guys here. There we go. This is the loop tail patch knife, whatever, EDC. Then on the next one, the plan is to make this a little bit smaller, but I don't know. There it is. Might tuck that. I want to test the grip and see how it feels here, which I can't do yet, obviously, because it's still really hot. Yeah, these tongs are Centaur Forge, which I really like their tongs. They're and the price on them and everything. The quality's been just fine. I've used them a lot. But yeah, that's kind of weird. I want to test the grip on this, see how it feels, but it's still really hot, so I don't think it's going to work very good. So on this one, the grip ends up being a little bit longer than necessary because of the loop. I typically make the loop a little bit smaller. It's not a big deal, but I'm going to tuck that loop back in a little bit so that it's more isolated from the handle instead of kind of looking and functioning like an extension of the handle. Like the handle should end where the handle ends and then a loop. So I might even do something I haven't done before and kind of bend it up at the back so that it's really distinguished from the rest of the handle. And then in general, I'll probably try to make the loop a little bit smaller. But this is your lanyard hole, you know? If nothing else. Decorative functionality. So if you envision a patch knife and you're out there messing with your muzzle loader out there in the snow or something, and you drop your patch knife and lose it, that's kind of a bummer. So this would allow you to tether it to your Possibles pouch to all the rest of your kit and not lose it. Plus it looks cool. So that's kind of the idea here. Or in modern application, you can use it for an EDC tether. The tang and stuff's a little bit twisted, so just kind of straightening that out. Need everything to sit in line. Looks pretty good. And then we'll do the same thing up through the blade. Just make sure it's nice and flat, straight. We've got a little bit of taper on the blade and the handles of the tang. But we're not forging the bevel in, so that makes it a little simpler to do. Makes it easier to keep everything flat and flat and true. good. Oh, I almost forgot. I need to put my stamp in there. That's what I like to do on the forged blades. Put the compass rose in there. One consideration on building a knife like this is that your handle scales have to be finished at both ends, you know, on the ends of them before you put them on, because just like with the front of the scales, the back of the scales are also inaccessible once they're installed on the knife. They're inaccessible for finishing. Come on now. Get over there. Pretty straight. I can always come back and tweak it a little bit after annealing, so it doesn't actually have to be absolutely perfect, but it's really close right now, so. All right, there we go. This is our first one off the line here today. Try to get her over there to show it to you guys, of the loop tail EDC or patch knife, whatever you want to call it. Try to get it so you guys can actually see it. Anyway, that's what we're going with on this one. Cool beans. All right. So we already have that other one started, so we'll go ahead and throw that in the forge. It's looking like this right now, so this one's going to be a little bit bigger. So we got to start by thinning the stock down a fair amount. Thanks, Austin. Yeah, what are you planning on making first, Austin? What's first on the agenda for you? Yeah, if I hadn't thinned that tang down as much, then the amount of steel for the tail would have been a little closer to what I was shooting for. But it's a more prominent loop on there, but I think it just kind of adds to the design, you know. It's still a small knife, so it's not like it's making it too crazy. So, yeah, you know, I like it. I'm going to leave this one like that, obviously. And they're all going to be different, you know, which is cool. One of the cool things about it, of course. Which, you already know that. I am digging this. I'm digging this. I think this will turn out pretty great here. Started the stream a little earlier than last week, but I think we're just now getting to where more people are able to join. Okay, so that's what I ended up with, is I got some fish lips in there. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of a cold shut right here at the end, and it happens when you forge it together and it pinches the material. Instead of forging it out, it kind of folds it over onto itself. And you really got to watch out for that when you're forging the tip down in that fashion, by hand or otherwise. Okay, so this is going to work out pretty good on this one because, you know, I thinned this down and this tip dropped down, and I'll be able to just forge that up. But the next thing we're going to do is put that finger choil in. Now, a little tip here on any forged knife. Oh, sure. Is I like to put the finger choil in further back than the finished spot. The reason for that is, unless you're very, very dialed in on how much material you need and exactly where to put everything, it's very easy to get too much material on the tag and you end up with like a really long handle that you end up having to cut off. Which if you have to do, that's fine. But if you put the finger choil further back and you make more of a shorter handle, then what you can easily do is sneak that finger choil forward in your final profile refinement on the grinder. And that's very simple to do. You're just scooting your ricasso forward and making an exact length of the handle that you want. And then that allows you to maximize. So that means you made the blade longer than it's going to be, but that allows you to just maximize everything. So you can make the handle just as long as you want it and then get the most out of the blade too, instead of putting the finger choil too far up. You know, you can't turn extra handle into more blade in that case, but if you leave the finger choil further back, you can sneak it forward with your small wheel on the grinder, kind of a deal. And anyway, I found that works out pretty good. Little tip there. That's cool. Ruby. All right, let's get this finger choil forged. Already kind of took too long to get it to the hammer. Lost a bit of heat, not too bad though. Not bad. So this is where we're at now. So now I could just forge this down and get the amount of length out of the handle that I'm gonna get with the material that I've allotted. Excuse me, and if it's a bit too short, I just sneak this forward a little bit in the final profile refinement. I found that technique to be helpful personally. Thanks, James. I appreciate you tuning in. Got to stick this. Told you guys at the beginning that I was heat treating the spear we forged last week, and I gotta stick it in here and normalize it in the kiln here. Front of my ricasso. It was looking pretty crisp, and then I just dinked off the edge of the corner of it right there. So now it's all washed out and crummy. Don't you just hate it when that happens? First one is all cooled down now. So we've got this loop sticking out the back. I might have to think about that. The handle's perfect, and the loop is maybe a bit much, to being completely honest, right? I mean, it's kind of stylized, you know, it's kind of a style, right? It's got some flair to it or whatever, but that's, I mean, worst case scenario, I just cut it off and, you know, and there's no loop on it anymore. That's the worst case scenario right there. But in general, the idea is to make the loop a little more small, a little smaller, a little less gaudy and in the way. I guess it all depends on what you're going for. If you're trying to go for a fancy schmancy deal, then maybe you leave it like that. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't have to decide. And I could always shorten it. Forge it back out, clip it off, and redo it. That's 100% an option also. That's the great thing about forging is getting over till it's over. All right, I'm going to thin this down a little bit here. Yeah, I think that's what happened is I've given myself too much material again for the tail, and I'm going to remedy that before I try to make a loop out of it. Because I don't want see, this is like 3/16 inch thick still, and that's really thicker than you need for a knife this size, especially in the tang area, because I want that tapered down. I want the tang tapered a little more. So I'm gonna taper it down a little more to my liking, and that's gonna inform the length of that tail, and then we can just clip it off to where we want it. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have expected to get the exact amount of material for that tail just from the beginning. That's probably not realistic, you know. The idea of isolating some material for the tang or the tail and then expecting to adjust that later on is a little more realistic. Unless, of course, you know exactly what the dimensions of this project are supposed to be, but I don't, because this is a one-off and I'm building it off of a concept, not an exact design. So it's not like I have a blueprint here telling me to, you know, isolate half an inch of material here and do this and that. Whatever else. I'm going to take care of this little cold shut here on this third one. Okay, not bad, not bad. Not bad at all.
Can I go to Yabby's house?
Not yet.
Well, okay.
So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and clip about half of this material off. So, in the very beginning, when I thought I didn't give myself enough material, I was quite incorrect. Again, if I had left the thickness of the tang about, you know, almost twice as thick, then that would have been probably about perfect. Just got home from work. That's what I was saying a minute ago is I started this live stream a little sooner, well, about an hour sooner or something like that than last week, but I figured most people are just now kind of able to tune in. So what we're forging here is some patch knife type knives, you know, a little EDC utility with a loop tail, and this is the first one, and I've got way too much material on the tail, and the more I look at it, the less I like it. So we're gonna fix that. But we're working on the second one here and getting things dialed in a little bit more, and coming out pretty good. I think I may have shorted myself on this one now. Like I said, still trying to get this dialed in. I feel like I might have just given myself not enough material now. I cut that off too much. Hey, I didn't claim to be an expert on building these particular knives. These particular style handle. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and you can probably tell. But we're gonna get it figured out. Okay, you can ask her. Okay, that's fine. All right. Another consideration on these loops is to not harden them. And wow, our barometric pressure changed. Couldn't figure out why my forge was getting a little hotter. It's because I had it set to 5 psi, and in the last hour, I thought something was going on. The pressure was up to like 7. And I think it's because of the, maybe not, I don't know. Something changed though. I think we do have a system coming in though. All right, well this tail is getting precariously thin now. I'm starting to feel like I have no idea what I'm doing on these. Has anybody else experienced that? The barometric pressure changing, and then, because I know it'll affect, maybe it won't affect the regulator on your propane, but it does affect how the Venturi burner is working. So yeah, let's just clip this off right here. Hey babe. What's that? A knife. I'm doing a loop tail on it. This one got too big though. Making these patch knives with the loop tail lanyard. This one turned out better. Don't want a giant loop on it. Lunchtime? Huh? Like one. Yeah. Okay, excuse me. This is more bueno, I think. I like this. See, it's not. Yeah, it's a little lanyard loop. It's not like a massive extension of the handle. And that's still, like, you could pull this down more and put this little curly right here. And I've done it that way in the past. I don't know. I mean, I kind of like this. We'll roll with that, see how it looks. Whatever. But this is better. And yeah, so let's go ahead and fix this first one before we before we start forging the blade out on the second one, because that was just too much loop. Third time's the charm, eh? For me, it's usually like 14th or 15th time is the charm, you know? If I'm honest. Depending on what it is. Also, the other thing that can happen is depending on how crisp your angle is when you draw that tail out, this one's really washed out. And that's not bad necessarily, but it does kind of affect where you're going to put that loop a little bit. So that's something to think about. does not take long to heat up. Those little bitty dimensions. It also doesn't take long to cool down. This is going to end up being a very sensible loop size, I think. Just a very practical little loop style size, I think. Hey, what's up? Don't get too close to the forge right here. Okay, you got it. Watch out for the camera. Come over here. You gotta stand back over here. You can't be too close to that because that's not safe. Nope, nope, you gotta stay over there. Go ask Mom. Pair of like scroll tongs or something might be handy, but I don't have any of those. All right, well that's a little more that's a little more reasonable. That's a little more reasonable. Okay. All right, we're gonna start forging the blade down on this one now. Give you guys a view of the forge for a little bit.
Dad, is it okay if you can, like,
Well, not right now because it's got a hole in it. Anybody has any questions, throw them out. Feel free to I don't know, ask a question. Discussion point, something. So I'm forging the tip up on this knife a little bit here. Got my tiny little hammer, a little wide. But we do really need to thin down the blade quite a bit. Jeff, yeah, I do. I mean, I don't worry about decarburization, but I definitely take it into account. You always want to make sure that there's enough material at the edge of your knife specifically to remove some back to the finished dimensions of the blade. And that can, depending on the type of steel, that can be anywhere from like, I don't know, let's say like 20 thousandths to more. And depending on how long it's in the forge, a lot of different factors, but you do have to account for decarb because it is going to happen to one degree or another. And some steels are worse for that than others. 50 to 100 is really not too bad. It's not one of the. It's not bad. It does. Every steel has, gets decarburized when you heat it up in atmosphere. But like I've said before, 80 CRB2 is the worst that I've ever worked with. 50 to 100 isn't too bad. It's about average. But that's something that you want to think about in over forging your bevels, for example, can actually have a negative result if you're overzealous with that. It could be possible to not leave yourself enough material to completely remove the decarb at the edge and where the edge is going to be progressively as the knife wears. So that is something to think about. Okay. Got like this hump right here, but it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna show you why. The handle to kind of drop down. It's just a much better line to the knife. So as you can see right there, that kind of brings the spine, the curve of the spine in line with where the blade is a lot better. And that's going to be really nice. We're still going to have to clean up the back of the, clean up the spine a little bit, take a little bit of material off of there, but it's overall pretty sweet. So again, it's no thing, and this is another reason why I like to forge my finger choil further back, because it's really hard to get a really nice, well, for me anyway, maybe you guys are better at it, but to get a nice crisp corner right here when forging, like blade and then choil, it's really easy to ding that with the hammer and wash that corner out. But if you just forge, another benefit of forging the finger ricasso or the finger choil back further is that you're going to grind that washed out area off anyway, because the actual radius is going to be further forward. So that's another nice benefit. And then, like I said earlier, being able to dial in the exact length of the handle that you want. So we're gonna forge the tip of the blade up a little bit more and get more of that line that we're looking for. Yeah, 01 will decarburize just like anything else, and the other thing that can affect that is the atmosphere on your forge. If you're running too lean, it's called an oxidizing atmosphere. You're gonna get a lot more decarburization, because again, what causes decarburization is the steel contacting oxygen at a high temperature. It allows that carbon to bond with oxygen and leave the steel, if I am remembering correctly. It also allows iron to combine with oxygen, which is what scale is, iron oxide, which is another effect of atmosphere contact at high heat. So anyway, if you have a what's called a reducing or carburizing flame in your forge, in your propane forge, or the equivalent in like your coal forge or charcoal forge, where the oxygen fuel mixture is such that there's not a lot of excess oxygen. It's getting all consumed, or at least for the most part consumed with the fuel, and or you have an excess of fuel slightly. That means the oxygen is getting used up before it hits your steel, your blade, and that's going to give you less decarb as well. So that's something to think about. All right, we gotta fix these lines a bit. Now we're talking. Oh yes, that is looking very nice. I do believe. Ricky, I don't know what you mean by bigger Damascus billet. That's pretty relative. I have forged Damascus in a single burner forge before, depending on the particular forge, the particular burner design, that can work. But in general, I would say if you're going to do a bigger billet, you know, depending on what that means exactly, you'll probably be happier with a larger forge, like a double burner, something like that. If only for the fact that it's not even about how hot the forge can get, it's about how much surface area that heat is actually applied. Because you could have a little spot in your forge, and I'm sure if you do much forging, you'll find this. It can get up to a certain temperature here, but you move it, you know, an inch over or an inch back or forward, and it's not going to have enough. You know, it's not actually going to heat a very large piece up. So as I'm talking this out, my answer would be probably not. You probably want a larger forge with a couple burners in it, because you're trying to get it's not about temperature, it's about how much area you're trying to heat to that temperature, if that makes sense. Well, I'm pretty happy with the way this one is turning out. I'm not gonna leave this blade like this. That's just kind of excess material. But the lines are there that I want. You have to forge the lines you want, and if there's extra material, you just let it go where it goes, and you're gonna take it off later, and that's all fine and good. And that's what we have going on here. So I'm really digging how that one is coming out, even though that's not going to be the final blade shape. I'm going to have that back of the spine, or the back of the blade, the spine, continue on that nice trajectory that you can see right there. So it should be pretty sweet. Do just a tad more here. Get our stamp. And you have to remember done this before, so I had to move my stamp forward because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be moving my finger choil forward, and if I don't remember that when I put my stamp in, then my stamp will be back in the ricasso area or somewhere that it shouldn't be. I am digging it, man. I don't have any soapstone chalk. I want to try to show you guys what I'm talking about a little more. I'm going to sketch in where approximately where the finished ricasso area is going to be, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Somewhere in that neighborhood. And then we're going to probably bring this down something like that. This is a terrible representation, but you get the general idea. So anyway, so the handle and blade length are going to be a lot more balanced. There you have it. All right, let's on to number 3. I kind of want to do five of these, nice little half batch kind of a thing. Here's our spearhead from last week. This is normalizing right here. I don't want this in the, I got the fan running. I don't actually want to I don't want it in the fan. It needs to cool down a little slower than that. So I'll just put it in the vise over here. So once that cools down to a black heat, that spearhead, I can sphericize it. That's a process that takes a while. A.T. Smith, how's it going? Got a few people filtering in and out. So I had to grind this off a little bit because I had some fish lips on that. Go ahead and cut that off. We'll be able to get two more knives out of this piece. So that'll be four knives total out of that first piece. right, I'm gonna run and do a pit stop real fast. Okay, we're back. So, anybody have any plans for this weekend? So, Rick, on the thickness of the edge before quenching, so for example, if you're using 01 steel, you could literally leave the edge or the blade full thickness with absolutely no problem up to a 1/4 inch thick. 01 tool steel is it's a deep hardening steel. It hardens very well in your 10-second oil. You don't need a thin edge to get the steel hard. Now, that is not the case with something like 1095 or 1084, and those types of steels are not deep hardening, and they do need all the help they can get for speedy cooling during quenching. They need all the help they can get to fully harden. And so on those types of steels, you would go as thin as you possibly could. That would be prudent. You don't need to do that on 01. And or other steels that harden better than the simple carbon steels. Like 5200, it hardens it's not as deep hardening as 01, but it's almost a deep hardening steel, basically. And on that, I routinely, I'll leave it an 1/8 inch thick, full thickness on some knives sometimes. When I'm doing that, I'll quench in Parks 50. But like these well, let me show you. These knives where I literally just pull them out of heat treat at the beginning of the beginning of the stream here. I did rough grind these. They're 5/32 thick, and anything over 1/8 of an inch on 5200 I like to rough grind prior to heat treat. And so thickness on the edge with these, we're at just under 70 thousandths. And that's, you don't even need to go that thin like I mentioned, but that's plenty thick to keep from warping, plenty thick to avoid decarb, and I should say that I don't rough grind them until right before quenching, so I will normalize and spheridize at full thickness, and then rough grind, and then austenitize and quench. So they're only, that thickness of 70 thousandths is only subject to one heat cycle of decarburization, and it's really very minimal in that case. So hopefully that answers your questions. I don't know what, honestly, I don't know what 0.8 millimeters is off the top of my head, but that sounds like it's thinner than it needs to be. Well, I can guarantee it's thinner than it needs to be, particularly on 01. And that's part of why it's warping on you, because 01 hardens so effectively. It's gonna potentially have more stress in that process, depending on what you're using for coolant. So this is kind of crummy. I'm gonna clean this up on the grinder so we have less opportunity for cold shuts and stuff when we start drawing out the material for the tail. So that's a little better. And our fourth piece, we'll start drawing that point down also. So we'll stick that in there as well. Get that moving in the right direction. Oh, ADCRV2. Yeah, that's like I said a minute ago, a little bit ago. ADCRV2 is the worst steel for. Maybe it was somebody else using 01. I thought you had said you're using 01. Is that somebody else? Oh, that was Jeff. Sorry. He was also having trouble. So maybe that answers both your questions a little bit. Yeah, ADCRV2 is the absolute worst that I've ever used when it comes to decarb. It's a great steel for what it is, and I use it for heavy choppers or something that I want to be really tough. But it does decarb very badly, in my experience, and so you want to be cognizant of leaving extra material for that in that respect. And then ADCRV2 hardens a lot better than like 1095 or 1080, so you don't have to worry about leaving, or you don't have to worry about getting it super thin before quenching, or very thin before quenching. You can leave it, well, you know, like 70 thousandths, something like that would be just fine. All right, well, this is the third one out here. So I think I can gauge how much material I need for the tail, hopefully. So these kinds of knives pair really well with some kind of natural handle material like bone, antler or stag, or ironwood. And I like to put a little acid etch finish on them just to kind of darken them up and give it a little more of a rustic appearance. So kind of a neat little knife. So this one was a little cleaner on the end, and you can see how we got it forged without any fish lips, but you can see ever so slightly how that can start to form. And what you really kind of have to do is pay attention to drawing material from the back and pushing it forward, because if you just concentrate right on the tip there, it's very easy to kind of close those lips over each other and get that infamous fish lips cold shut at the very end of your material, which you definitely don't want going into a finished blade. Starting to form ever so slightly. Take it and flatten that. So the problem you're going to run into with trying to heat treat any stainless steel in a forge, but just in general, this is what happens, is that you have to heat it up usually somewhere between 1800 and 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. So quite a bit hotter than any carbon steel. You guys, well, you gotta come around this side, okay? And so you have to heat it up way hotter, and that means the decarburization and the scale problem that we were just talking about is going to be greatly enhanced when the steel is in contact with any oxygen. So the way that there's different ways to get around this, like on an industrial level, they'll have like vacuum furnaces or inert gas like argon will be pumped into the kiln or the furnace, and so that there's no oxygen for the steel to react with, because of how hot you have to get that stainless steel and the amount of time. This is the other thing, you have to hold that steel at so that this chromium rich alloy has the time to get into solution. Takes a lot longer than a basic carbon steel or low alloy steel. That extended time and that extra high heat, if that steel's not protected from atmosphere, it's going to destroy the steel, and it's not going to be good. So small makers like us, we have a couple different options. Some guys actually do retrofit their kilns for argon gas, and you can do that. Most guys, what I've always done is use a high temperature stainless steel foil packet or envelope to encapsulate the steel in and protect it from atmosphere. You could do this in a forge, but the major problem you're going to run into is in a forge is while having that in a steel packet, being able to keep that blade evenly heated at the right temperature for an extended period of time. And by extended, I mean like 30 minutes. And that might not be that long for that particular steel, but all your high carbon stainless steels, you're holding the temperature for about 30 minutes is what it takes to get everything where it needs to be. And I would expect at least 15 minutes for something like that, maybe, but it's probably longer. So getting an even heat at the right heat for an extended period of time in a forge is going to be difficult and exacerbated with trying to keep atmosphere off of the steel. So for all those reasons, I personally would not try to heat treat stainless steel in a forge. If you had to, some kind of what do they call it? I don't know, where they have the tube in there that's kind of acts as a chamber and helps even out the heat. Can't remember what they call that. I haven't used that myself personally, but that could be an option if you really had to use a forge for stainless steel. But in general, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah, any carbon steel or low alloy steel is going to develop a patina, and there's a lot of people that really like that and enjoy the character of the steel.
What type of worm is this?
Oh, it looks like some kind of grub.
Are you feeding it to the chickens?
Yeah.
We have to buy some DIY now.
So easy to heat treat and enough chromium to be stain resistant are not compatible, really. To stay in the easy or simple to heat treat category means you're going to have to stay within a low alloy steel, which means it's not going to be stain resistant. Like 52100, it's got 1.5% chromium. It doesn't, like, maybe on a very minute scale, it might help with corrosion resistance, but nothing, like, not any appreciable amount. And there's other low alloy steels, but like I say, until you get into the higher chromium, and we're talking like minimum 13%, something like that, depending on what it is. Until you get up in that area, you're not going to have a stain resistant steel. And once you do get up to that level of chromium, it's a whole, like I said, it's a whole different animal for heat treating because of the temperatures necessary and the hold times necessary. And that's just the nature of it. Ransom, how's it going? But there's plenty of people that appreciate a good carbon steel culinary knife, myself being one of them, but not everybody likes that. I'm gonna actually throw in my round dies and do a little bit of width and adjustment here, because I want to make sort of a wider little skinning knife profile out of this particular one. And that's easily done here on the old press. Something like that. Got a couple projects, that's good. What we're working on here is these loop tail, that's what I'm calling them. Kind of a patch knife utility EDC knife with a forged out tail, giving you a nice little lanyard loop. This one, the handle length has to be adjusted a little bit, but kind of a nifty project. And this one I felt like doing more of a skinning blade on it. Kind of a groovy little deal here. Yes, sir. Get a bit of a wider blade going on here. A little variety. Yeah. That is what I'm talking about. Adjust that a little bit. I think most people are heat treating just the blade to try to make the overall knife tougher, and that's one way to do it. But you can heat treat the entire knife, and then obviously it'll all be the same hardness, more or less. And that's not a big deal if the heat treat that you do on the steel and the steel itself and the thickness of the steel all provide a tough enough knife. So for example, my knives, all of my medium to smaller knives are fully heat treated. Well, these are going to be different. I'm not going to harden the loop on these because that could break too easy if somebody really got crazy with it. So these ones I'm going to quench more or less just the blade and part of the handle. But in general, my knives are all fully heat treated, and the reason is because the blade, something in front of the ricasso is going to break before anything behind the ricasso does. Right, because when you grind the blade and you grind that steel off, you think about the cross section of the blade right in front of the plunge line. That has less steel in that cross section than anywhere behind it, unless you've got a crazy skeletonized tang, which I don't. I skeletonize the tangs or weight reduce them with drilling some holes, but not like crazy, like they're still stout, right? So if something's going to break, it's going to be in front of the ricasso or even just from the plunge line forward. And so the toughness of the tang is not really a big issue. Now when you start talking about differential heat treating where you're leaving the spine soft as well, that's where it's a little bit different. So if you left everything on the knife softer except for the edge and about halfway up the blade from the edge, then you're getting into the territory where you could say, okay, everything on this knife is tougher and nothing is going to break no matter what you do to it, kind of a thing. But that's not realistic use of the knife. Like, there's no circumstance you're gonna need that kind of insane toughness under anything remotely normal use, okay? And so, unless you're literally trying to make a pry bar, that's really not a consideration. So, what I do is I provide an appropriate tang thickness and appropriate stock thickness for the knife, so that the knife can be used even beyond its intended purpose long before it actually fails. But I hope that answers the question. And I don't know if you're talking about just heat treating from here down, or here up on the blade, or if you're talking about just the edge of the blade, because those are different. And if you're doing an actual differential heat treat where just the edge of the blade is hardened, then that's fine. You can make the argument for that. But if you design the knife correctly, it's really not a huge consideration in my mind. And I've never had that be an issue. And again, depending on what kind of steel you use. If you want a really tough knife, you use something like 80 CRB2 or 8670 or this, I'm drawing a blank now, but those are two really tough steels. And even with a full heat treat on those, they're going to be properly done, and they're still going to be very, very tough. Alright, sweet little skin and blade. Start thinning that tail down and curling that around. I feel like the handle is a little bit longer than it should be, though. I kind of did the full length on this handle. I kind of feel like I need to draw some material here, bring this back a little bit, and then actually remove a little bit of length on that tail. I just don't want a whole bunch sticking way back off the end of the knife. I don't think that's going to be a good look or good balance. I think I'm gonna cheat a little bit and just grind that out real fast. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do that. See how this works though. So what we have here is a mostly forged blade. And mostly forged is partly ground. How forged does a blade have to be considered a forged blade? That's what I want to know. mean, these are pretty forged, so. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. I mean, if you stop and think about it, all steel is forged, period. And then you forge some more, but you know. I think what I'm going to do on this one is a little different. I'm going to do more of a S curve on this here. So again, the material for the tail is a bit longer than I need, but I'm going to do a much longer curve on the first. See how this works here. See if I like it or not, I don't know. Yeah, 80 CRV2 is pretty impressive steel. That is the steel that I used to forge my Japanese gunto, which is basically your samurai sword. That's what I used to forge that on Forged in Fire, even though they actually gave us a chunk of 5160. Oh, that's the other steel that's super tough. Yeah, if you want to use it for super tough applications. 5160, that's one of the other commonly known super tough steels. They actually gave us a chunk of 5160 to use, but I used 80 CRV2 because I had been doing a bunch of testing for my own purposes on 80 CRV2, and I just recently completed a bunch of testing on that before going on the show, and I was really confident in what it could do, and I had used and tested it a lot more at that point than 5160, and so even though 5160 is a nice tough steel as well, I went ahead and used the 80 CRV2, and I also happened to have some on hand for that reason, and so combining those factors, that's what I used for my sword, and it performed admirably. And I did okay, I don't like this. I'm gonna have to cut this off and forge it out thinner and put a smaller loop on it. This is getting out of control here. Anyway, I had to use a forge to heat treat the sword. Even if I had a kill at that point, which I didn't, it wouldn't have fit. And I tempered it with a torch And you know, the heat, I don't know what the final Rockwell hardness on it was, but it was on the higher side of what you would probably leave a sword at, I think, because when I tempered it, you know, I barely got any color in the temper, so it was probably on the higher side of hardness, and it still held up perfectly well and cut super well. I had a bit of a bend in the sword out of the heat treat that I was never able to get out. And Jay Nielsen saw it, you know, and obviously, and in the episode, it appears as if the bend happened after some of the testing, but I know it already had a bend, and it just stayed that way. A little bit of a bend. So that's just where the steel ended up, and I wasn't able to coax it over. And so in the episode, it appears as if my sword bent a little bit during testing, but I am 99% confident that's not at all what happened. So I guess what I'm remembering on this whole deal is that less is more on these loop tail knives. You get too much of a loop going on there, and they can get, as we're seeing here, they can get too cumbersome too fast. And yeah, less is more. It's too easy to make it kind of end up being like an extension of the handle, which you don't need. You just want a little loop for practical and decorative purposes. But I'm just remembering here in real time that it doesn't take much to accomplish that. So there you go. Hi. How are you doing? Good. You guys playing? Yeah? What? Yeah, it's pretty hot. All right, I like that. It's not too much, but it's definitely a little loop there. right, this one's about finished. I just need to straighten up the blade a bit. Well, I was thinking of doing 5 of these, but we have one more started, and that's what we're going to get out of this piece of stock. So I think I'm going to finish the last one we have started and just making it even 4, and call it a night at that point. All right, that's what this one's looking like. We obviously have to clean up the profile a little bit, but nice design there. Pretty sweet. Excuse me. Well, we don't have as big of a crowd this week. It's not quite as exciting as forging a spearhead. Speaking of the spearhead, get that put into the annealing spheroidizing cycle. So does anybody have any more questions? Any more questions on the subject? Oh crud, I forgot to stamp this last one here. Got it all nice and straightened out, and I forgot to stamp it. That will not do. Ricky, have you seen my recent video, well, fairly recently, on grinding blades? That I have some tips on grinding blades. It's like several videos back, I think. Yeah, that video should help. I don't necessarily address that specific issue, but the things that I do address, if you take those into consideration, they very likely will help alleviate the issue you bring up of getting back to the same angle grinding. Being able to find the same angle as you come back to the grinder each time it's a skill to be learned, but I would say that it's also it can also kind of be a byproduct of a good setup and good grinding practice overall. And the things that I talk about in that video address multiple things in that vein. Multiple things in that vein that should also help with that issue. You know what? Excuse me. You know what? I think I want to take this and just drop that handle down some more. I like this a lot. And I think this knife right here could benefit from a little more of a drop to that handle. I think I'm going to do that. it's a way of reducing the overall length without reducing the surface area that your hand has to actually grasp, which is an interesting concept in knife design. Alright, that's kind of cool. If you let the edge get overheated on the grinder while you're sharpening it, yes. But if you're careful to keep that from happening, then no, it's just taking material off. The thing is that the edge is so thin at that point that it can heat up extremely quickly. So if you're grinding on it like normal grinding process, then that can be too aggressive for a final edge sharpening. Yeah, there's a greater risk of overheating the very edge of the knife blade. So, you just have to be really careful. If you're gonna do that, oh, excuse me. I mean, what you have to think about is and this would happen in a very, very quick manner at a very thin cross section like that. But what you're specifically avoiding is getting that steel. You want to keep it well below, of course, but you don't want it to ever get any hotter than your tempering temperature. And that should be, you should be able to stay well away from that. So let's say you've tempered it at 350 degrees. It's possible to keep the steel below 350 degrees if you're careful with the sharpening process. Well below 350 degrees. Don't use a dull belt, stuff like that. Thanks, have a good night. Anybody else have any questions or comments as we watch the sunset on the western horizon? Well, it already set. We've just got some nice colors there. It's pretty much dark. It is dark. As we wind into the weekend here, Friday evening. We are finishing up number 4 here. Well, I would say we're about halfway through number 4 here. Getting a little more width on the handle on the tang there. I haven't done this much forging in a while by hand, if I'm honest. We have 4 people left on the stream right now. 4 people who are either will have to start calling the faithful, or they just got busy with something else and forgot about it. Could happen, you know. What are we at? How long have we been streaming? Trying to see where it shows that. I don't see that on here. Oh, 3 hours. 3 hours and 9 minutes. This is the last one we finished up here. Or skin and blade. That's going to be nice. That's good. I like that. And then we readjusted the handle on this one. It's still got a sizable loop on that one. That was the first one. They're all a little bit different. Hey Yukon, yes, I'm forging something. I'm finishing the number 4 out of 4 knives that we're forging tonight. Sort of a hatch knife inspired design. With a tail, like a loop on the end of the tang. See if you can see that. Anyway, that's the big happenings around here this evening. What are you up to tonight, Yukon? We have 4 people left in the stream. 4 people who got busy and forgot, or they have nothing else going on. We will finish this knife on stream. We will. We've come so far, we can't turn back now. Okay. Go ahead and put a curly Q in this, or whatever you want to call it. Ooh, we have 6 people now. We just gained like an additional sizable number compared to what we just had. Two lost souls have stumbled into the stream. Okay, look at that, pretty spiffy. Pretty spiffy. A little more, just a little more thickness adjustment on the blade here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and stamp this one. I remembered to stamp all of these blades this time. There's times that multiple times when I forged the blade, and I always try to stamp it when it's a forged blade like that. And there's times when I forget to do that. But tonight, we're going to be 4 out of 4. So that's just wonderful. So whoever gets these knives can enjoy the super authentic forged stamp. Pretty spiffy. I'm gonna run that through just for texture and flatness one more time. Well, I appreciate everyone hung out. Everybody who watched this afterwards if you made it that far. I realize it's not the most glamorous forging project, you know, we're just forging knives and stuff, but I appreciate it. pressed actually. I use the half-anodized forging press to widen things up on the handles a bit more, and widen things out on the blade a little bit. Powering it. And it turned out pretty sweet. They all did though, actually. They're just all a little bit different. Honestly, the only one that I'm still thinking about here is the very first one we forged. Great little knife, but I feel like the loop is still protruding too far to the rear of the knife handle. I don't know, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's just me being picky. But you know what? I think I'm going to trim it off again and forge it out a little narrower. We're going to do that. Whoops. We're going to do that later. That's what I was going to wrap this up in a plate, satisfying how it turns out. That's kind of what I do here. We have 8 people in the right now. Wow. We literally doubled our viewership from about 5 or 10 minutes ago. Hi, 8. Oh, now we're down to 7. Okay. So fickle. This is the second time that I've trimmed this. Again, even before we get into the chat, on the screen here. How many people can we get to sound off into chat? How many people can say what's up, or you watching from where? Where y'all at? As the sun sets on this Friday Forge stream here, doing the last little bit of tweaking for the second time on this one. Let's go out strong, hey. Am I not getting the chat? What's going on here? Or is everybody just being super quiet? What's going on? All the way back to top messages. Why does it do that? Yeah, just go back to it. Nobody wants to brain on this just a teeny bit. All right, I like that better. That fits the knife better, I think. Nice little loop there at the back for decorative and practical purposes. That fits the knife better. Fits the size of the knife better, I think. We'll be happy with that. We're just gonna do a real fast flattening. Flattening. Which there's no edges sticking up and stuff like that. All right, that's it. Sweet. That's awesome. Very good. That's what we're gonna ask for, guys. Do that for the evening of going slow and hanging out. All right, guys. Hey, appreciate y'all coming along. We're going to end this stream and hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks and take care.